help it. Some faces young and old to warm the hearts when it's snowing and it's cold. You're gonna have to find a crew, it can't be anyone. They'll have to be there by your side and do what must be done. So go, man, you know that you have it night through day. The pain you will feel it to bring it on with the Archer County Band. Doubts come and some may never die. So I'll ask myself, should I stop before I try? No way, man, mistake, it has been said. I'm all in, so there's nothing I'll regret. But time is ticking and there's so much that's going through my mind. Will I make it? Yes, I will. Our spirits are entwined. So let's get this show on the road. I'm here, I'll stay and I'll carry the load to bring it on with the Archer County Band. But hold on a second now, I'm starting to feel the strain. Was it a bicycle? What is wrong with my brain? Is it the end of me? No, I must still believe. So I'm still alive, you see. Heck yeah, now I'm on my way. But let's stay focused, there's still a job in hand that we must do. Cameras start to click, we know we're creating something new. So go, Marty and Sarah and Mark and Matt, Owen, Smitty, McCrilly and Jamie Lane in the Archer County Band. The Archer County Band. The Archer County Band. The Archer County Band. Stop the clock, we're done, we're rolling. Sound the horn and sing that we are going. 27 hours, that is the time. So let's hop on the bus and let it shine, 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 shine. Say sha la 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 la, 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 sha la 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 la.
Okay, I think
We are live, but I'm not sure. So I tried to get this process of the live stream up and going, but I'm not exactly sure if everything has worked. I can hear myself just fine in the headphones. I'm looking at the actual image here. I don't know. It looks like I'm live, but I'm not sure. So if there are any people who happen to be watching at the moment, if you could drop down into the, I'm guessing you call it the chat. That's what I'm using here on my phone. So if the audio sounds good, if the video looks fine, then you can let me know. I'm not entirely sure. As I said, I haven't done one of these things before, so it's hard to tell if it's actually going right or not. I've got somebody in saying you're live and direct, ML. Great. Okay, well, I'm looking at it on my phone, and the phone is doing something funny. So when I'm trying to track it on the phone, it doesn't look like I'm live at all. But I'm going to trust whoever has commented that everything is actually working. Let me give this one more go and see. Okay, that looks like it's working now. I can see it on the phone. But there seems to be a delay on the image that I'm getting on the phone. So maybe I need to go via the little streaming software. Maybe that's the best thing to do. I'm assuming the delay is meant to happen, but I'm not sure. Anyway, if I'm live, if you can hear me, and you can see me, then we're just going to horse on, and then I'll see the carnage afterwards. Because, I don't know, from what I can tell, there seem to be, whenever you do one of these lives, from what I can gather, you can't really edit the video for a while after the live. So as soon as this goes out, I really don't know what it's going to look like. I can't even tell how long I've been sitting live on the screen for and not actually doing anything, because I was on my phone trying to figure out, is this actually working? And then there seemed like there was a delay on the phone. Then I'm looking at it through the streaming software, and I can actually see myself talking and moving in real time on the streaming software. But then whenever I go into YouTube itself, into the live YouTube feed, there seems to be a delay. So it says we've been going for, 10 minutes? So this is going to be a bit of an experiment to see how this works. I'm going to use the streaming screen here to guide me, because it seems to be moving and interacting in real time. So anyway, if it's an absolute mess, then so be it. Messes are going to happen. And that is the beauty of live technology. All I do know is the next time that I do this, I will be a heck of a lot more prepared for all of this sort of stuff that's happening now. And once I get a gauge that everything's fine and everything's working, then it'll be seamless streaming. Anyway, I'm going to plow on. We're going to get on with tonight's show. You're all very welcome to Bandido Talks. We're going live tonight. As promised, Saturday night is going to be live News on the Tube. News on the Tube is what we're going to do on a Saturday and a Sunday night. 7 p.m, that's going to be the time that currently I'm going to stick to. I can see now it's 4 minutes past 7, so I'm actually not too late. I think I started the stream a little bit early, actually, just to make sure that if there were any gremlins that I'm not running away in to the stream itself. Now, whenever we finish this stream and I'm able to get at the actual video, I'll probably trim off the beginning, because I'm going to guess there was a whole bunch of dead air. There was probably just an image of me staring at my phone, frantically, I suppose, trying to get this sorted. So on the final video, obviously on the live stream now, you're going to see what you're seeing live. You're going to see all of the good, the bad, and the ugly on the live stream. But whenever I post this video later, I'm sure I'll be able to access it in some way and edit it. And if there are any
big long delays between me talking and whatever, any of the audio coming in, I can chop that out whenever I get into the editing process later on. Anyway, we're just 5 minutes past 7, so we're going to get straight into tonight's show. It is a live show. The chat seems to be working. I'm still delayed on YouTube, but if anybody is in the chat and knows how these live streaming things work, then you can drop me a message in the chat and let me know if it's actually normal for, if you do a live stream, that there's a delay on the actual YouTube preview that I'm seeing compared to the streaming software. I'm guessing there is. I'm guessing that's supposed to happen. When I go in here, it seems like everything's in good health, but there's just a little bit of a delay. That's fine. We can deal with that. It'll be a lot smoother the next time we come on. So anyway, we're going to get straight on with the show tonight. I'll keep temporarily monitoring the chat here, but until I get feedback that there's something wrong, which I don't think there is, then we'll just keep going. If there's a problem with the audio or the video or something bizarre happens, put it down there in the chat if anybody is watching. Of course, there may be nobody watching. There may be 0 people tuned in to Bandido Talks Live. If that does happen, then I will just simply review the entire video once it's finished, once it's uploaded, and then we'll work to improve it the next time that we come on. It's as simple as that. So, let's get on with tonight's show. I think what we're going to do is we're going to go until about 7:45, because I want to try and do what I had said the last time, which is I want to finish the news on the tube here, live on YouTube, and then I'm going to go straight over to Rumble and get a live stream set up on Rumble. Now, this is all experimentation. It's all for me to see, essentially, how these streaming platforms work. I've never live streamed in my entire existence, so I'm hoping everything is actually being recorded and captured as it should. But I'm going to go straight after this particular live stream over onto Rumble and then test out Rumble and see how it behaves. Is it easier, harder, whatever it is, and then we'll come back tomorrow night and hopefully it'll be a little bit smoother. And then, of course, in the weeks to come. So for now, we're going to go for the next, let's see, we are on 7 minutes past 7, so we go for about 35 minutes. Okay, so we'll call it quits at 7:45, and then that'll give me about 15 minutes to go over to Rumble, set up the live stream on Rumble. From what I can gather, it might be a little bit easier over on Rumble, but we'll see. Time will tell. Until then, we're going to get straight into tonight's show. What is the point of news on the tube? Why are we doing these live streams on a Saturday and Sunday? News on the tube, 7 p.m. on YouTube. Well, what we're going to do is, if you've watched actually the first 2 episodes that we've released this week, what we've talked about is Saturday and Sunday, we are essentially going to take bog standard news items. So bog standard news items that appear on our news feed, in this case on my Google Chrome. So standard news items, we're going to take them and see if we can extract some of the lessons from those bog standard news items, and then we can perhaps implement them in our own existence. So, before I get into those actual news stories, what I would say is feel free to comment, leave stuff in the chat if there are people still there, and then I can temporarily check the chat to make sure that everything is going fine, and if there are any comments that are left there, I can address them whenever I see them. Aside from the YouTube chat, I'm going to get straight into our show and all of the articles. So I'm going to use my mobile phone here. And literally what I'm going to do is go straight on to Google Chrome. And when I go on to Google Chrome, a whole bunch of news stories come up. So let's see what we're going to be greeted with. This is just about as live for me as it is for you. So I'm not exactly sure what is going to greet us. Let's go in and see. Okay, we're going to go down through as many of these articles as possible, and let's see what we can learn from them over the next 30 minutes. Article number 1, let's see. We're going to go into this, we're going to read out the title. I'm not going to read out the whole article, but we'll read out enough of it to get a gauge of what is actually going on. So the first article says, World News. Photos show polar bears chilling at home in abandoned Russian research station. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of polar bears here. So it says, I'll read out the first bit. Polar bears that have taken over an abandoned polar research station off Russia's far eastern coast were intimately captured in drone footage by Vadim Makarov. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. The photographer was filming the landscape of some island, I cannot pronounce that, Koluchin Island, during a cruise in all of these. Of course, I would have to pick the news article that has got all of these Russian words in them. That would be just typical. So I go through all of this effort, getting the live stream set up. First time I do a live stream, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, it looks like we're live. Great. I'm sure there were some gremlins. And now I get to our first news story, and I'm greeted by a whole bunch of Russian words that I cannot pronounce. Okay, so let's keep going. So the photographer was filming the landscape of Koluchin Island during a cruise in the Chukchi Sea in September, when he noticed polar bears using one of the abandoned buildings as a shelter. Okay, so we get the idea. I don't need to go down through all of this article. So the idea is you've got a whole bunch of polar bears have essentially made this abandoned Russian research station their home. Okay, so you may think, what can we learn from this story? Well, actually, something has came to my mind. So here we have polar bears. Polar bears, I don't know a lot about polar bears. And I don't know a lot about polar bear tourism, but I know a little bit. So for example, in Canada, there are polar bears. And part of their tourist operation is bringing people out. I can remember seeing this in these big armoured vehicles where they get to see polar bears in the wild. Okay? So they're in these big, huge vehicles. They're really high off the ground. And the polar bears to be sort of climbing up, not climbing up, but sort of line up against the side of these big vehicles, and they're kind of stirring up at the humans. They're probably thinking, I would really like to eat you. And of course, everyone's going, oh, look at this polar bear. Oh, isn't this just magnificent? That's fine. That's tourism. So polar bears, I'm assuming, what do we have here? We have this place in Russia. This probably won't be used for tourism. But what is the point that I'm going to make about this story? So we've got polar bears chilling out. Notice the language that they use, okay, in the news article. Photos show polar bears chilling at home in abandoned Russian research station. And they've got this picture. Now, you probably can't, I don't know if you can see the picture, but it's a picture essentially of a big polar bear outside this abandoned building. Now, the way it's worded, polar bears chilling at home, it sort of makes them sound human-like. Chilling, relaxing, something that a human would do. And when I start to read through the article, the article sort of portrays the polar bears as these cuddly, human-like things. I can just see as I'm reading down the article some of the vocabulary that is used. Now, I think polar bears, like all animals, they are beautiful in their own way, outstanding creatures, okay? And I'm glad that they are on the planet, that they aren't extinct, because they add this wonderful diversity. They have a very important role to play, of course, in the food chain, and we wouldn't want to take these creatures out, obviously. They are an apex predator in their given domain. So wherever they are in Russia, okay, wherever this Russian research station is, there's probably no question that the polar bear is not going to have a natural predator. It is at the top of the food chain. Okay, we're going to take humans out of this, obviously, but humans are a little bit of an exception. Let's imagine a food chain without humans here, okay? So, excluding humans, polar bears, they're at the top of the food chain here, okay? So nothing's going to be coming and hunting a polar bear. Now, there's something important, I think, in this. And this article is actually reminding me of this important thing. A few months ago, I think it was in maybe July, maybe August. I can't remember. It was a few months ago. And what happened was, again, on my Google Chrome, I went on, I think I was looking to Google something. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, all of these news stories, like they always do, came up on my phone. And there was another news story about grizzly bears. Okay? Only this time, the news article was informing me, in this case, that in Albania, okay? So in Albania, I think it was Albania. It was either Albania or Romania. I think it was Albania. It doesn't matter. I think there are bears in both locations. Let's say Albania, because apparently that's where Lord Voldemort was residing in the Harry Potter sequence. Okay, so I'm gonna go with Albania because I have a Lord Voldemort bias. Albania sounds better. So in Albania, there were, well, I think in general, the country has a lot of grizzly bears. Okay, and what this article was telling me was that a motorcyclist had decided that he was going to pull over on the side of the road and feed a grizzly bear that he could just see off-road. Now let me fill you in on some details here. You can probably see where this article is going. This gentleman is no longer alive. Fill in the blanks. And I'm not trying to make little of what has happened here, but there's a lesson in it. And it's related to this news story where we're seeing in the title, photos show polar bears chilling at home in abandoned Russian research station. Yes, polar bears are fantastic animals. So are grizzly bears. So are all of the bear family. However, back to Albania. This motorcyclist decides to pull in on the side of the road. He sees a big grizzly bear. And he thinks, okay, I'm going to have a break here because I've been on the road for a while and I'm going to feed this grizzly bear. Now, bear in mind, excuse the pun, but we must consider that along the side of this particular roadway, there are multiple signs that say, please don't feed the bears. They are wild animals. They are not soft and cuddly. Please do not feed the bears. That's what it says on the side of this Albanian road. But this motorcyclist clearly must have saw the signs. He ignored the signs. He got off his motorcycle and he decides, I'm going to feed this grizzly bear. Now, we're going to fill in the blanks. It turns out that that grizzly bear, of course, had a couple of cubs. That grizzly bear got extremely angry, I'm assuming, with this motorcyclist, and that was the end of his life. Okay? I think there was some images online, maybe even a video of the final moments. He takes out, of course, his phone. He takes out his phone. So he's going to feed the bears. He takes out his phone. And the bear charges at him and kills him. So, when I read this news article and I see that polar bears have colonized this Russian research station, good for the polar bears. Good for them. I'm glad that they're adapting to this Russian research station. Fantastic. I am going nowhere near those animals. Not for tourism, not to feed them on the side of the road. Nowhere near them. Not for me. These are not creatures with a human psychology. They have bear psychology. And I think some people do need to remember that there's a difference between the two. Human psychology and bear psychology. So the lesson that I would like to bring to this story, even though I'm talking about something slightly different in Albania, we can, of course, enjoy watching these animals and seeing them thrive. And if you want to go on a safari or a tourism program, fine, that's okay. But what I would say is, please remember, in the case of polar and grizzly bears, they do not have human psychology. So don't get overexcited around these creatures. And when I say overexcited, I mean Don't feed them when you're literally on your own with no protection. Don't feed them. And for God's sake, do not take out your phone to film them while you're trying to feed them. Okay? So, in this case, okay, I'm glad that the polar bears are doing well. And I think it's great. However, please remember, folks, polar bears and apex predators, because that's what we're talking about here. They're at the top of the food chain. The grizzly bears in Albania, they're at the top of the food chain. And whenever we enter their natural habitat, we are at a disadvantage, especially if we are on our own or we aren't equipped in some way to deal with the bears. So, story number one, I'm really glad that the polar bears are chilling at home in an abandoned Russian research station. Good for the polar bears. For me, I won't be going near any bears, okay? I won't be feeding them on the side of the road. And I think this chap who is taking photographs of them, I think he used a drone. Let me see. I hope he used a drone. I'm assuming, yes, drone footage. Okay, I had read that out in the first paragraph. That's a good way. That's a good way, I think, to watch a bear. Through a drone camera. Fantastic. I personally, and everybody can do whatever they want. It's a free world. I personally do not want going into the habitat of an apex predator. And for those of us who find ourselves, for example, I'll give you an example. And then we move on to the next story. Final example on this story. I went to Switzerland back in 2019. Okay? And this is important. Okay? Because it just goes to show you when you're not tuned in. This was 6 years ago. So what age was I? 24. And I wasn't tuned in. And I could have got myself into a pickle. Now, somebody might say the probability of you getting yourself into this pickle is slim. I'm going to explain the pickle that I could have got myself into. So I went out to Switzerland in 2019. Now, I thought, but I didn't do a lot of research, I thought that there were no bears in Switzerland. For whatever reason. That's what I thought. So I go out to Switzerland for 8 days. And I'm staying with a good friend. And what I do is I take my friend's bicycle out almost every day and I go out into these big national parks and I'm in these forests and I'm on this mountain bike and I'm really enjoying my cycling workout and it's great. You know, I'm going up hills and I'm seeing all this natural, beautiful scenery. So I do this for 8 days in Switzerland and it's great. I had a great time with my friend and I went home safe and sound, no problem. I then get home and I thought to myself, you know, I spent 8 days out in Switzerland and I didn't really research what the wildlife situation is like out in Switzerland. I kind of just, you know, I gave nature the benefit of the doubt. Okay, I gave it the benefit of the doubt. I thought, no, there's probably nothing out there. Of course, I go home and I check and I go onto YouTube and I type in bears in Switzerland. And the first video that comes up, big grizzly bear in Switzerland near an urban area. It's actually crossing a bridge leading to an urban area. There are a whole bunch of people going, oh look, there's a grizzly bear. How cool is that? And they've got their phones out. Oh, I better get a video of this grizzly bear. You can imagine my reaction when I see that. And there's an important lesson in this, folks. Do your research wherever you're going. Whenever I went to Switzerland, I did not do my research. I was out cycling on a mountain bike. Just me and my backpack and the mountain bike. Like an absolute wally. I'm going through all of these places where you would expect to find a grizzly bear. In fact, the video I saw on YouTube, it was a grizzly bear near an urban area. The places that I was cycling, they were out in forest parks. I was way out in the sticks. I didn't do my research. And I could have got into a pickle. Imagine there had have been a grizzly bear in one of those forest park areas. I was brown bread. Nobody around. There was nobody in these big forested areas. Nobody. It was just me on my own. And every now and again I would get this creepy feeling as if, I hope there's no, big wild animals here. Oh, surely not. I'll give nature the benefit of the doubt. Do not do that. Do your research. If I ever go to Switzerland again, I will be going nowhere near those areas. Nowhere near those areas. So be careful, folks. I love nature, okay? And I love my tigers. I love my big cats. But I personally am more than happy with watching them on a computer or phone screen. That's good enough for me. I ain't going anywhere near these places. Okay, so that's polar bears. Let's go on to the next story. Let's see what else we have. I'll get out of this. Now, next story. Let's see. What do we have? This is from The Guardian. I don't believe this. These articles that I'm going into, they've all these difficult words to pronounce. So it says, Baxi He, author of I Want to Die, but I Want to Eat Chokbokki, dies aged 35. The Korean author's hit self-help memoir, which follows her conversations with her psychiatrist, sold more than 1 million copies worldwide. Let's read a little bit of this just to see, do we get some context? Okay, so Ba Si-ki, the author of the hit self-help memoir I Want to Die, but I Want to Eat Chokbokki, has died aged 35. According to the Korean organ donation agency, Baek saved 5 lives through the donation of her heart, lungs, liver, and both kidneys. Okay, so I'm not going to go down through all of this article. I think I've read enough there. So we have this young lady. She is, from what we can tell, according to this article, she's a pretty, would we call it a best-selling author? 1 million copies. That's a heck of a lot of books to sell. She has died, okay, and aged 35, and it seems to be that she has donated a lot of her organs since her death, so her heart, lungs, liver, and both kidneys. Okay, and apparently she saved 5 lives through doing this. Okay, so what can we learn from this? So here we have a young lady, okay? Maybe someday I'll be able to get these up on the actual video, but we have this young lady, okay? And clearly a talented young lady. She's sold over 1 million copies of her book, and she dies aged 35. Now, I haven't went into the depths of the article because I don't want to keep us here all night, me just reading out articles. We're going to just see from the headline and just the first few paragraphs what we can take away from this. So, this young lady is 35 years of age. And that is an incredible amount of life to leave on the table. We would obviously be aware that in the West and in general, over the last, 100 years, we've made many developments in our hygiene, or even before that, but just in general, we've developed a lot as a society to the point where now a combination of, we're not having as many infant mortalities as we did, nowhere near as many infant mortalities back in the day. And, people are getting older and we have a much longer life expectancy than, say, the ancestral human. An ancestral human, it wouldn't be unusual for an ancestral human, and when I say an ancestral human, I just mean a human that lived, 50 to 100,000 years ago, didn't have modern civilization. Okay, so an ancestral human, hunter-gatherer, it would not be unusual. In fact, it would be fairly commonplace for an ancestral human living 50 to 100,000 years ago to die aged 35. For obvious reasons. Okay, we're out in the wild. We have smaller groups, 30, 40, 50 people in our group. We haven't got a way, there would have been a lot of infant deaths because we don't necessarily have the hygiene practices that we have now, and, our knowledge of science and ways in which we can essentially protect the population health-wise. And, we're always constantly looking for food. it's a tough life being an ancestral human, and there's war potentially. Other tribes may be coming in and invading. There's some debate about how aggressive or violent we were as humans, but there was probably a bit of this where there's invasions and people die that way. We're out in the wild, as I said, predators, injury, infection, all of these things. So life expectancy back in the day for for an ancestral human probably was around 35 or 40. You'd be doing well to get to 35 or 40, something like that. It's very different nowadays. Nowadays, somebody dying at 35 years of age is what we would call a tragedy. That is a tragedy. 35 years of age, let's say the average human lifespan is, let's call it 80 years of age. Okay, now I know there's some fluctuation depending on the country and whatever else, but let's just call it 80 years of age. We're pretty used. We have grandparents or have had grandparents, and it's not unusual at all for people to live to 80 years of age or beyond it. But let's just put the ceiling at 80, or let's just say 80 years of age is the average life expectancy. So, this girl dies at 35. So she has essentially left 45 years of life on the table. Really. That's a lot of life to leave on the table. She's not even at the halfway point yet. So whenever I read something like this, and I don't know the circumstances surrounding her death, I don't know if she was ill, who knows? If it was sudden, I'm assuming if she had died in a car accident or something like that, maybe let's just have a look and see. Was there actually a cause of death given? So, first book, it's telling us about her history here. And do we have a cause of death? Right, the last sentence in the article. The cause of Beck's death is unclear. So we don't know why she died. All we can say is if you're dying at 35 years of age and the cause of death is unclear, that is strange. That's the thing. That's the only thing I can say about that. That is strange. So it wasn't a car accident. It wasn't anything like that. We don't actually know how she's died. Maybe the details will become clear in the next few days if you were to follow the story. Perhaps it's not really important for what we're talking about. The important thing here is 35 years of age, that's a lot of life left on the table, and it is a tragedy. We would call that a tragedy. No question about it. And what can we learn here? Well, what we can learn here is a lot of the time when we think about living our life in the fullest possible way, sometimes we can get stuck in a routine. We can just walk through each day without really thinking on our classic autopilot. Okay? And we sort of take life for granted a little bit. Now, I'm not saying everybody does this. I desperately try not to take life for granted. So every day I wake up, I feel very privileged. I try to do something productive with my time. I try to spend my time with people who I highly value, and I really try not to waste my time on people or activities that aren't productive or providing me with a sense of, I suppose you could say, well-being or satisfaction with life. However, no matter how hard we try, sometimes we can get a little bit sloppy. We can get a little bit sloppy and we can get into a groove, and sometimes, especially when you're my age, 30 years of age, you can think you're immortal. You think, no, nothing can stop me. I'm young, I'm fit, I'm in good shape, I feel good right now, nothing can stop me. Well, reality check. Many things can stop you. I could go out the door tomorrow morning and I could get into the car and I could have a car accident. That's a possibility. It could kill me or it could disable me in some way that my life is never the same as it was before. I could get some weird infection that could kill me, or it could again disable me or put me in hospital or do something. It could cause organ failure and I might need to get an organ removed, who knows. The point is, we don't know what really is around the corner. And we can have this autopilot / sense of invincibility about our existence. But when you see a story like this, here's a young lady, 35 years of age. She has left essentially, in my book, 45 years of life on the table. And when I see this, what we can learn from this is, folks, we need to do our best to try and not take our lives and the comfort of our lives and the brilliance of our lives for granted. Easier said than done, maybe, but what can we do to not allow ourselves to fall into this autopilot trap or sense of invincibility? Well, sometimes it's nice to take a moment and reflect on what it is that you have now that some other people either currently in the world don't have or that your ancestors did not have. So I look at my current setup right now. I've got this handy cam staring at me. I'm streaming on a laptop. I'm in this lovely warm house. Okay, I'm very comfortable. I don't have to worry about any predators trying to hunt me. In general, I've got, access. Not in general. I have access to tremendous amounts of food. I have access to people who I value tremendously. And sometimes it's nice just to take a little step back because we can get busy in our lives too. And sometimes we forget about this. But to take a little step back and have a think about what it is that we have and what it is that some other people do not have. In this case, this young lady has lost the ultimate thing, which is her life. We can always lose things. And maybe this is another lesson from her story. Let's say this live stream turns out to be crap. A really shitty live stream. Okay? And what I mean by shitty is, let's say I review the video afterwards and there's a whole bunch of mistakes. Let's say, I make my dinner and I drop the food and the plate smashes on the ground and there's food all over the floor. Let's say the car breaks down. All of these things that sometimes we can dramatize them to a degree. Oh my goodness, I can't believe the stream was crap. I can't believe I dropped my dinner. I can't believe my car broke down. All of these sorts of things. These are things that can be replaced, folks. I can always do another live stream. I can always make another dinner. I have access to loads of food and cooking equipment. If my car breaks down, it's not the end of the world. I just have to have a little bit of patience, call a few people. I've got this thing called a mobile phone where if I am in trouble, I can call people. Did your ancestors have a mobile phone when they got stuck down a snake hole? Out on a hunt? No, they didn't. So this young lady has lost the most valuable thing that all of us have, essentially, which is our life. So it's nice to remember when you, and when I say nice to remember, when you see a story like this, it sometimes just it certainly reminds me, and I hope it could remind people who are listening to this, that your life can change dramatically. Maybe not through death in this case, but life can change dramatically in some ways, and it can change very quickly. So when we see a story like this young author who's clearly talented, has sold many books, and she's died at a very young age. So folks, please, the lesson is, remember, if things go wrong, okay, always remember you have something that, having your life, having the ability to breathe, to move, to interact with those you care about, no matter what else happens, if you have that, well, you're very much still in the game here, folks. All of the other stuff we can find replacements for things, material things, but there aren't a lot of replacements for living tissue in this case. Okay, so when you go, you go. And you certainly don't want to be taking what you have for granted. And maybe this is a good way to install a little bit of gratitude into the system for what you have so that you don't take things for granted, is to go read up on your ancestral history. Or maybe have a look at what life is like for people in other parts of the world. Perhaps it could be as simple as you're walking down the town and you see someone in a wheelchair. Someone who's lost the power of their legs. Now that person's still alive and there may be a heck of a lot of life still in that person. But sometimes when you see something like that, say somebody in a wheelchair, okay, it can be a reminder to us all that we should be very grateful for the functioning of our bodies and for the life that we have and the people that we have around us. Okay, so let's move on to the next story. Next story. Okay. Well, look at this. The next story says the following. It's from Sky News, and I think we'll finish on this one. Obviously, the next time we do a live stream, I should hopefully be a heck of a lot better in terms of getting things set up. I hope it came across okay. Let me just do a very quick little check on the chat here, just to see, because I've been going down through all of these news articles, and I'm looking to see if everything is functioning just fine. So let's see. Somebody has put in the comments, a wise man once told me a bunch of facts about bears after a book he read. I know who this person is now, because I'm looking at the YouTube name, and I had no idea who it was. But now I do know who this person is, and I think this person knows that I know who they are. And this person does know me because he remembers that I did, in fact, many years ago, read a book about bears relating to our first story. It was a book about all the different species of bears. Now, it didn't go into tremendous detail on their biology per se, but it was just a book about this guy who had travelled to different parts of the planet, and he sort of interacted with the local people who would have frequent encounters with these bears to try and get a feel for what it's like to live alongside these animals. So, yes, I did indeed read that book. That is true. So, our final story, and then we're going to call it quits. This one says the following. Donald Trump admits it's possible he's being, quote, played by Vladimir Putin over Ukraine. So let's read this first little paragraph here. Vladimir Putin was first successful in getting Donald Trump to hold off on more severe sanctions on Russia, and has now seemingly played a role in persuading Trump to hold off sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. And then it says here, Donald Trump failed to secure a peace deal with Vladimir Putin when they met in Alaska in August. Okay, so it's talking about Russia and Ukraine and Donald Trump and America getting involved and all of this sort of stuff. Again, we don't really need to go down through all of the article because essentially the headline, and that's what you'll notice, the headline and the first paragraph kind of, for me anyway, tells me all I really need to know. I could go down and read more and get more details, but for the purpose of the show, we're going to keep it short and sweet in this sense. So it's an analysis article. So what can we learn from this? So it's telling us that Donald Trump admits it's possible he's being played by Vladimir Putin over Ukraine. Well, whenever I see things like this, okay, so it's obviously talking about a war that's currently happening on the planet. Now, thankfully, here in Ireland, we are not involved in any sort of war currently. And to be fair, Ireland is it's a fairly neutral country on the global scale. So when it comes to how many people Ireland has pissed off, to my knowledge, I don't think Ireland really has pissed off anybody on the global scale. We're kind of this small little Ireland, or this small little island. And actually, to be quite honest with you, I think Ireland's reputation globally is actually a very positive one. Whenever I was over in America, the Americans got tremendous I would say maybe amusement is the wrong word, but they were very fascinated by this Irish guy who has this accent, and they couldn't believe the accent. They just, one American lady said to me, I think she was from South Carolina, and she said, I can't even remember what her accent was, but she said something along the lines of, I don't really know what you're saying, but I just love your accent. She wasn't even listening to what I was really saying. She was just staring at me going, I love your accent. I just love the accent. So whenever I was over in America, again, over in Spain, so I talked about in episode 1 earlier this week about a little bit about going over to Spain, and it was the same thing. When I went over to Spain, all the kids over there, as soon as I went into the classroom to teach in the secondary school, and as soon as I told them I was from Ireland, they all started shouting, McGregor, UFC, and they started getting up off their chairs and doing all these sort of what they thought were UFC, classic UFC movements. And they all started shouting McGregor at me. I'm afraid they were sadly disappointed once they actually got to know me. I haven't a baldy notion how to do any UFC or anything like that, but they had their hopes up. So anyway, again, when I was over in Switzerland, something similar. Again, oh, you're from Ireland, and it's like, oh, Ireland's a cool country, you know, Guinness and the Shamrock and leprechauns, and there's all of these stereotypes that people have. So when I see a story like this, you know, about Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, I see that article, and the first thing I think is, will this really affect me? So, does it really affect me? So I see the article, and you know, as soon as you see Donald Trump's name, people have a whole variety of different opinions about Donald Trump, about Vladimir Putin, about all of these people. And I don't get caught up in that. And this is what we were talking about in episode 1, not getting caught up in the hullabaloo of the headline. So I can almost guarantee you, a whole bunch of people will probably have seen these 4 sentences. Or not even 4 sentences, 4 lines. Donald Trump admits it's possible he's being, quote, played by Vladimir Putin over Ukraine. Before people even read anymore, I guarantee you there is a significant portion of the population screaming and shouting, Donald Trump, oh, I hate Donald Trump, or I love Donald Trump, or Vladimir Putin, oh, he's this and he's that, and this thing that's happening over here, and I can't believe it's... And I'm sort of looking at this and thinking, you live in Ireland. You live in Ireland. Think for a second. This article, by putting Donald Trump's name in the title, by just putting his name in the title, the article already knows that a whole bunch of people who have nothing to do really with the Ukraine and Russian war, a whole bunch of people will just get extremely emotionally invested in both of the names of them 2 leaders that are in the title of this article. For me, and this would be the lesson in this, when I see this, the first thing I think is, how does this really affect me? What Donald Trump does, what Vladimir Putin does, I'm from Ireland. Now, this is going to be different depending on where you live. So this is why I'm saying you need to think, first and foremost, how does this affect me? Now, selfishly, I look at it and say, well, I really can't think of a significant way in which this affects me. Now, somebody might say, oh, well, you know, by the Russian and Ukrainian war going on, that's going to affect petrol prices and diesel prices. And I don't have a car. I actually don't own a car. So that's not going to affect me personally. Now, it might affect somebody else, but let's say I have a car. It's going to affect the prices of fuel. Okay, next question. By how much? Oh, well, they're going to go up they'll be up by a few quid. Oh, well, okay. When you say a few quid, how much? Are we talking here, your usual fill up in the car, it'll be what, £5 extra? £10 extra? Okay. I would call that a very mild effect. In the grand scheme of things, I would say that's a very mild effect, okay, on your existence. It's an effect, but it's mild. Okay, anything else? Oh, well, you know, it could spark World War III. Okay. It could spark World War III. What do you mean by that? Oh, well, you know, they have nukes. They could start throwing nukes. Let's think this through. If they start throwing nukes around, that is going to affect them as well. So if everybody starts throwing nukes around, it won't just be us affected, it'll be them affected as well. That would effectively destroy the planet in a sense. So they'd be essentially shooting themselves in the foot. Because if somebody launches a nuke, somebody else will launch a nuke, and then somebody else, and then before you know it, civilization ends. So let's remember, that is fairly unlikely. I would say fairly unlikely that we're going to get nukes thrown. So what else? How else is this affecting me? Well, and then this is the thing. Maybe if somebody's watching this, because it'll be posted later, put some ways in which this is going to affect you. I'm giving you my perspective. The war in Ukraine and Russia, or the war between Ukraine and Russia, is not really affecting me at all. Really. The effect, if there is one, is minuscule. I am able to go out and do what I normally do in my day. I get to play my guitar. I get to talk with the people who I like to talk with. I get to go about my existence just how I want to. It does not affect me, really, in the grand scheme of things. And that is how I would encourage you to look at a headline like this. You're seeing names. These names are divisive among the general population. Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, war in Russia and Ukraine. These are divisive topics. I would encourage you to think hard when you get irate, perhaps, at seeing those names and the circumstance in which the names are mentioned. Think. How does this actually affect me? How does the war in Russia and Ukraine actually affect me? Practically, in my life. We could speculate about how it might affect me. So, we're saying nukes. Well, reality check, folks. If countries start to throw nukes around, we are all brown bread. We're all toast. Okay? That is fairly unlikely. For the reasons that I've already explained, because that would hurt the very people who are launching them. Okay? So think, how does it actually affect you? The war in Ukraine and Russia, Donald Trump himself, and Vladimir Putin himself, they aren't really affecting my existence currently as it is. I still get to get up in the morning and do what I want to do. And until they affect my existence, again, this could be different for different people, depending where you're living. I'm just saying for me, and I'm saying to sort of think through these headlines when we see them. Think through, how is this actually affecting me? And if you come to the conclusion, after an analysis, a thoughtful analysis, that it really doesn't affect me that much, well then, you should start to see, perhaps, why am I getting so annoyed at the article? Why am I getting so, if it doesn't really affect me, why am I dedicating my energy and my time to this thing that really, for all intents and purposes, is not going to affect me? Okay, so we got through 3 stories. Not too bad. We're a little bit over time, so I'm going to call it quits there. I think that was a good opening. I think I'll be able to review the show and see what exactly happened at the beginning, because as I said, there was a delay on the YouTube studio video image, and there was not a delay then on my streaming platform that I'm using. So I'll have to go back and review that and hopefully get that a little bit smoother the next time that we come on, which will be, of course, tomorrow night. So tomorrow night we're going to go live again. News on the Tube. That was the first live episode we've done. We're going to do exactly the same thing tomorrow night. Hopefully on my end, it'll be a little bit smoother. Hopefully the audio came through okay. Hopefully the video has stayed strong. When I check here, everything seems to be fine. So we're going to call it quits for this evening. Feel free to come back tomorrow evening at the same time, 7 p.m. We're going to go through again for another 45 minutes or so. Some more news stories, see if we can extract lessons. I'll give you my point of view. Of course, feel free to disagree on any of the stuff I've said. Put it down in the comments. Please be as open as you can down there. And when I say open, I mean feel free just to say whatever you wish. Okay? Disagree, agree, bring up novel points of view that maybe haven't been considered here. That's what makes this entire, in a sense, channel and the episode of going on, the episode that is a live show. That's what makes it interesting when we get other people coming on and giving their points of view. So, all being well, I shall see you tomorrow evening, Sunday evening, 7 p.m. for some more news on the Tube. I'm now going to scoot over here to Rumble and see how we get on with a live stream on Rumble. I might be a little bit late because I'm cutting it a little bit fine here, but we'll go over to Rumble, see how it goes. If you're not joining me over on Rumble, then I hope to see you tomorrow evening, 7 p.m, news on the Tube. We shall get chatting then. So I'm going to cut our stream. Thank you very much, folks, for joining. You can like, you can subscribe, you can comment, do all of those things. And all being well, I shall see you tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Folks, enjoy your evening. I'll get chatting to you all very soon.